Hey there, YouTube. It's been a while. And this is not exactly an Ask a Maestro. It's more of just a vlog. I mean, unless the Ask a Maestro question was, Maestro, what have you been doing for the past few months? What I want to talk about today is a recording project that I just did in the Czech Republic. Now, composers going to the Czech Republic to record their music is kind of a thing. And of course, the reason that you go someplace else to do a project like this is economic. It is much less expensive to record in the Czech Republic than it is in the United States or Western Europe. But why would I do a project like this at all? Well, I mean, I write music to be heard. I don't know what other composers do, but I think that that's pretty much the universal reason why we write music. And you know, it's sort of tricky to get your music heard if you're writing for orchestra, because orchestras as institutions are sort of very large and lethargic, and sort of the point of entry is hard to get past. And in a way, there's a paradox, which is that if you want to have your music heard, you have to let people know what it sounds like. And oftentimes, if you have your music played by, say, a professional orchestra, there will be strict limitations on what you can do with the recording of that performance. But in the Czech Republic, I was able to get a deal where I had a dedicated recording session in sort of a studio scenario, and I had a total buyout of the product. So that means that I can do whatever I want to with the finished recordings. I could sell it to a record company, I could put it on my website, I could post it on YouTube or what have you. When I booked the recording session and I decided that I was going to do this, I really tried to commit myself to getting the most out of the experience. So for 2 months prior to my departure, I took Czech language lessons. I found a lovely tutor here in Portland, Oregon, where I live. And then, you know, I booked all of my travel. I flew from the United States to Stockholm, actually, just to visit some friends. And then I went to Prague. I took a train across the entire country of the Czech Republic, which was a really interesting journey. And I wound up in this small city called Ostrava in the far east of the Czech Republic. It's right around the border of Poland and Slovakia and the Czech Republic. And this is a really interesting little town because it's a former center of heavy industry like mining and ironworks. And now that has really disappeared from their economic structure. And rather than letting the town fall into decay, they have transformed it. They have taken the old iron foundries and coal mines and turned them into museums and art installations and studio space for young creative people. The studio session itself was very well run. We were not in a dedicated studio recording space, but we were in a contained room that is where the orchestra usually rehearses. And the quality of the microphones was excellent. The setup was all taken care of very professionally. I had sent all of the music parts ahead of time via PDF, just online, and they had all been printed out very nicely. By the way, if you're going to do this and you are from the United States, make sure that you format your pages for A4 size. That's the standard European size. All of the people who helped organize this were extremely kind to work with. The orchestra, you know, they were really very good. I mean, it's like a full-time professional symphony orchestra. It's a 96-piece orchestra. Now, I was recording 3 pieces, 2 for full orchestra, 1 just for strings. And I had hoped to end the session with the strings-only piece because it was the hardest piece, but their personnel manager asked to start with that piece. That being the hardest piece, the recording session started off, I would say, a little bumpy just because it's not easy to sight read that piece. But, you know, it did not take much rehearsal for us to start getting really very good takes. And after the break, when we came back with the full orchestra, things sounded amazing. Now, the Czech lessons are something that I am quite happy that I took. The orchestra, I would say, maybe like 30 to 40% spoke English pretty well, and then it sort of went down from there, and I'm sure that there were people who spoke no English there, maybe like quarter to a third of them. So I'm glad that I took the Czech lessons. I wish that I had taken them for longer. I was able to address the orchestra, you know, the instruments in Czech. I was able to introduce myself in Czech. I was able to call out the measure numbers and the rehearsal letters and give some basic instructions in Czech. You know, I would say I spoke maybe a third Czech and a third in Italian, you know, just as musicians do, and a third in English, and there were enough people there who could sort of translate. You know, anytime that I had to say something more detailed, I spoke that in English and it was translated for me. So this whole thing was just sort of an adventure. I've never done anything like this before. And I have to say, I'm really glad that I did it. Now, I have written an accompanying blog post to this vlog talking about the economics of this. and whether or not I thought it was worth the money that I spent on this whole project. And spoiler alert, I definitely did. Anyway, YouTube, I am now back in Portland. I am back sort of into the swing of things. I finished all of these touring and traveling for a little while. And so Ask a Maestro is going back into production. I have a number of questions that I'm going to tackle in the coming weeks. I look forward to hearing more of your questions. The recordings themselves, I plan to release in the coming months. I hope that you will enjoy them very much. And until next time, goodbye, everyone.